Great. Well, I have 1 o'clock, so New York time. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm Hugh Boston, a managing director here at JEGI Clarity, and we are super excited to have all of you joining us today for a very timely topic led by a very thoughtful firm and person. And that topic, of course, is creating value with AI. We're certainly excited to have Ben Herndon with us from KUNGFU.AI to lead us through some of the applications of this transformative technology and what companies should be doing to take advantage of the multiple opportunities that this technology represents. Rich?
Thanks, Hugh, and thanks to everybody joining. I'm Rich Kanefsky, a managing director here at JGI Clarity, and I echo Hugh's excitement in bringing you this webinar. We're hearing so much about the coming revolution in artificial intelligence and how AI is and will continue to be a disruptive force across industries. But how are companies applying AI today, and how can they leverage it across their organizations to create value for their constituents? As you mentioned, we're thrilled to be joined by Dr. Ben Herndon to help answer some of these questions and others. Ben is on the front lines of the AI disruption and is helping to drive the fast pace of innovation. Ben is the Chief Strategy Officer at KUNGFU.AI, an artificial intelligence consultancy that provides strategy, engineering, and operations that drive AI-centric transformation. Ben, do you want to give a quick intro on your background in KUNGFU?
Yes, thank you, Rich. Hi, my name is Ben Herndon. I'm excited to be joining you today. My background is in organizational and strategic transformation, mostly around emerging technologies. So in my earlier days, I worked with companies like AT&T on the proliferation of network technologies and how their clients and companies navigated those adoptions and applications. More recently, I was the head of AI strategy for Vista Equity Partners. So obviously have pivoted now from to the more recent technologies associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning. I also have a PhD in cognitive science and was a professor at Georgia Tech for several years, conducting research on the topic of organizational transformation. And prior to Vista was the first chief analytics and research officer for the IRS. I was recruited by then Commissioner Koskinen to come in and do a major organizational transformation there to help them better lean into the application of AI associated with minimizing non-compliance in tax policy. So very excited to be here today again. And a quick note on KUNGFU.AI, Rich said it very well, but we work with companies across, I think, 15 different industries at this point. Our goal is to enable them to compete in the age of AI, so really lean into leveraging artificial intelligence as a differentiator and in a way that can keep them at the forefront of their position in the industry. So I'll stop there and welcome.
Super. And Ben, it's great to have you out of the IRS. So that's so tell us, what are some of the ways that the companies are currently applying AI?
Yes, that's a great question. And it's not a short one, but I will try to keep it short for our purposes here today. AI has really seen a revolution. The AI has been around for a long time. I think the first, conversations around artificial intelligence date back 40 or 50 years. There have been several AI advances, several what have been referred to as AI winters, where it went kind of into a decline for failing to live up to its promise or potential. But over the last 10 years, we've seen a massive proliferation of not just data, but compute power, which has enabled this explosion of AI techniques. And what's listed here is, just a subset, but these are very real and, deep domains in the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And some of them, like explainability, are things that are companions to AI development. So these are not all necessarily standalone techniques. But the point to convey here is that as many applications as you can think of, they're supported by a host of these different techniques, sometimes multiple combinations of those techniques. And so we see not just, the explosion of these techniques, but we've seen an explosion of business and organizational innovation as a result, because it's really opened up our thinking to what's possible. What can we do with these things? What are some use cases that might bring value to our particular business? And it's really, imagination is the limitation. So, what we're seeing again is that, these use cases popping up across industries and across techniques that are really moving the needle for corporations and industries, and really our economy as a whole.
Mhm.
I'll take a minute and I'll talk about one particular domain in a little bit more detail. So a very big area of AI innovation and advance recently is computer vision. And computer vision takes several different forms. The oldest and most familiar form of computer vision techniques are called image classifiers. So take a picture, is it a cat or a dog, right? So the AI is able to successfully make a determination about what the image is. Where we've seen this applied, again, across industries, inventory management. So the ability of a camera to recognize an object on a shelf and classify it accurately so that you can say, hey, we're running out of this particular part or this particular product. In insurance, it's used to classify or order the nature of impacts. So damage to a house, damage to a car, for instance. In the oil and gas industry, it's used to evaluate the condition of equipment in the field. So a solar panel, is it damaged or is it not damaged? Parts like that. Similarly, e-commerce, I think we're all very familiar with, the way that marketplaces like Amazon position and recommend particular items, but in more dynamic contexts like a fast food chain, for instance, or back to e-commerce, where you might be having multiple iterations of a product in a marketplace. These techniques can be used to classify those. So the idea being that, you've got, even within this one domain, you've got multiple different use cases that an organization might consider. Another iteration of computer vision is called semantic segmentation. And this involves, not just looking at a single image, but looking across every pixel in the image to say, what do I associate that with, right? So you think about a self-driving car. It's gonna separate this is a person from this is a car to this is a tree. We've seen this again across a number of different industries, healthcare, and medical imaging, and I'll talk in more detail about a specific use case that we're working with there. Retail, again, we've think about a shelf in a store, and product companies or publishers pay specific premiums for placement in that store. So we've created computer models that can use vision to say, yes, my product is placed where it should be on the shelf, or it's not. In agriculture, it's used to evaluate crop conditions and soil conditions. In manufacturing, it enables what we call predictive maintenance. So, the sensor data is coming in and telling the model that a machine needs attention before it breaks down. And real estate and urban planning, where we've seen it applied to everything from, how is a particular community developing? So, use that development model to help predict changes in price and potentially new areas for investment. Or in the urban context, where, for instance, does a road need to be repaired because the imaging technology has classified a particular area of the road as susceptible to damage.
Ben, here's a question that came in, and we'd encourage everyone on to just fire in questions, and we'll try to get them in where we can. Visual effects. I don't know if you're that familiar with that per se in video, movies, et cetera, but do you have a view on the impact generative AI may have on visual effects?
Oh my gosh. That's, I think, one of the more profound areas where where generative AI, particularly in terms of like image generation, is changing the nature of the game. Gaming, for instance, not to borrow from my own language there, but the gaming industry is massively changing as a result of generative. A colleague of mine who was just starting up a new gaming venture, and they were talking about trying to create all the images that go into the game. And then GTP came out, and not GTP, I'm sorry, DALL-E and some of these other image generators came out, and they basically just went back to the drawing board and created everything within like a week. I mean, it's astonishing how impactful it is and how impactful it's going to continue to be. The downside, obviously, with both generative language and generative imaging is that it's going to be harder and harder to tell, the real thing from something that was created artificially. So, I think we're also going to be entering a new universe of fraud as a result, which, also creates other opportunities, right? Fraud detection is an area that we will talk about a little bit later, but, a very powerful area for artificial intelligence.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the third area of computer vision I'll talk about is object detection. So how does, an image, and again, you can see kind of how with self-driving cars, the previous technique would be overlaid with this technique to be able to say, okay, that is, I've detected that's an object, I've classified it as human. That launches the self-driving car into a very different kind of safety mode. But we've also seen this used to great effect in warehouse management, where there are lots of people moving around within the warehouse. For instance, we've applied it personally we created a prototype of a device that a trash collector would wear, and it could classify cars coming at them and create an alarm, so that if they were in the back of the truck loading trash and a car was approaching, it would alert them and they could get out of the way. From a security perspective, we obviously have seen, cameras picking up bad actors, maybe someone carrying a suspicious object. Banking and finance is an area where we've seen this work quite a bit in terms of navigating changes in demand or indicators of potential economic change. Marketing and advertising, very similar to the kind of ways that we talked about it in the previous slide, where you're looking and saying, okay, this is a person who is moving from here to here, and maybe it's good we show them a particular image or a particular advertisement to change their buying behavior. So I'll move to a specific use case that's something we've been working on recently. So one of our clients is a company called Clarity, and they worked with a very famous radiologist from Harvard Medical School. And she had this idea that an artificial intelligence self-learning algorithm could look across mammograms and be able to identify differences in the nature of human tissue that could predict where breast cancer would emerge. And this was something that they developed as a theory, but were never able to test or prove until they, realized the potential for AI to look across massive amounts of data, not just, number of clients, patients, but, decades of different images from those patients, and then tie that back to outcomes. So one of the key things here is what they did is they created a proprietary data set that was not just, decades of images from, a patient's mammogram, but also the clinical outcome. Did that patient develop breast cancer or not? And, the reason I think this is a fascinating example, because it shows how core data and the curation and the strategic curation of data is to the development of artificial intelligence. Before this, the way that AI was developed in radiology was you would take an image and a doctor would apply a label to that image or annotate that image to say, this is where I think we should look. So basically you were automating what doctors already do, not taking advantage of the true power of artificial intelligence. So what we did is we helped them, we took the data that they'd curated and we helped develop a model. And so again, we trained it on 1.6 million mammograms from hospitals around the world to ensure that there was no regional or racial bias, and created a model that can essentially predict where breast cancer will emerge 5 years before it actually does. So in this case, with about 77 to 80% accuracy. The expectation based on our economic estimates is that this could change, if widely adopted. This could reduce the mortality rate from breast cancer by 15 to 20%. Which that's
how did you train that model? Did you compare pictures of cancer with actual, or pictures to say, and then with actual results of whether there was indeed cancer? Okay,
that's exactly right. So the model would look across, again, sometimes 20 years of annual mammograms, and then it was told that in mammogram 14, this breast cancer was detected and confirmed. And so it would essentially what it's going to do then is look backwards across those images to say, what can I identify about the nature of the tissue in that area before it, again, 5 years before it ever started to show up, that may distinguish the tissue from the other areas around it. So again, that's the way that it can learn in a way that no individual human can, and that's part of the power of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, got it.
Another recent example of an application that we did, we work with a client that is a large finance banking player in the transportation space. And they deal with massive amounts of paperwork that are submitted daily, and sometimes in terrible condition, like someone who has crumpled a paper or a piece of paper, handwritten something on it, and then taken a bad picture of it with their cell phone to submit it. And they were spending, I'd say 70 to 80% of their daily effort in processing these things, these documents, just trying to get the data off of these sheets. So, having to go through and manually look at it, having to call back to reconfirm, things like that. We used a technique called layout LMV3, which was released, I think, last summer. And it represents a revolution in the way that data can be extracted from documents. So you're not just OCRing something, you're actually, optical character recognition. So you're not just converting the text or the numbers into, digital format. It's able to look and say, based on where that data was on the image, I can tell you which field it should be associated with. So if you think about something like destination on a form, someone might type the destination underneath it, or stack the address the way that we typically see, right? Like number, street, city, state, or it may be written out in a straight long line. This technique is able to tell the difference and categorize all of that data accurately, to the point that even with this difficult data to work with, we were able to extract data effectively at up to 95% accuracy. And that is not only significantly more accurate than how the human processors were handling that data extraction, it's instantaneous. So where they had usually had to wait 24 hours to get back to a client with a document processing decision, they were now have the potential to start doing it instantaneously. So again, fundamentally changing the nature of their industry and their economics.
Great.
Final example, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No question.
A final example I'll give is one where we worked with a firm to do pipeline prediction. So in other words, what is the likelihood that certain sales will actually execute within a given pipeline? In this case, we were talking about home sales with a very prominent realty company. They had obviously been using standard statistical techniques, which have a lot of predictive power if applied correctly. And, were getting reasonable results from their models, but they thought, hey, we're only scratching the surface here. So this represents too an area where you're able to take brand new techniques. So in this case, we did 3 different types of models, tree-based models, and 2 different types of neural networks, and accomplish something that what traditionally would only be approached from what we call a human supervised technique to a truly independent self-learning model that was able to increase the accuracy of those predictions by 15%. So, if you think about how that translates into projections, cost projections, where to pay more attention to deals than others, really impactful in terms of not just managing the business, but improving outcomes and revenue.
Sure.
So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ben. These are some fascinating case studies. Where are we right now in the evolution of AI and its application?
Oh yeah, that's a fun question, because as you can imagine, it's very exciting to be in this field right now. AI is truly exploding. A great example is generative, right? We've been talking about this a little bit, particularly with the question around imaging. But most recently, we're all extremely familiar with the emergence of ChatGPT. Now, please don't try to read all of this text on the right, but I'll use it to make a point here in just a minute. So ChatGPT is an example of a generative AI, and a specific one in that it's a type that associates language. So it's a type of what we call large language model, or LLM. So it's generating text, it's generating language. And there's, when ChatGPT was announced, this last spring, what's shown on the right is just a screenshot of a small subset of Hugging Face's catalog of over 150 large language models that have been created and launched since ChatGPT was made public. And this number is growing every day, and it's impossible, almost impossible, to keep up with the differences between them. What we're seeing increasingly is specialization within these models. So you're seeing some subset of these being trained specifically in, for instance, the medical or healthcare space, so that for companies seeking to apply a large language model, they're starting with one that is already trained on data unique to their industry. Then what they might be able to do is go in and use their own data to further fine-tune that large language model to really generate value and confidence in their own applications, in their own industries. So the point is really that this is just one domain within artificial intelligence, and we see just how massively the advance has proceeded. What are the implications of this, right? So staying with the generative example, McKinsey recently released a study that updates their estimates of automation based on the potential for generative. Their updated adoption scenario suggests that in probably 20 years, 50% of current work activities could be automated. So if you think about the economic impact of that, it's astonishing. What does it mean, for companies? Really the image on the right is designed to show that there are use cases that can reduce costs through automation. But the bigger lens two is about labor productivity. It's about, being able to do more with the time that we have available as workers, as knowledge workers particularly, by being able to completely offload certain things like text generation. So, we've all heard examples of people who were for instance, in sales and marketing, and they need to write a proposal, and it used to take them several hours or even a day to pull up the proposal together. And now they can feed ChatGPT or any other LLM with a sequence of prompts that will allow it to generate something that, instantaneously, that they can then just go in and edit. So maybe it's already 90+% there. And if you think about what that means from a productivity perspective in a sales and marketing context, it means you can be spending more time doing the things that are actually likely to move the needle in terms of closing deals, such as personalization or communication and outreach. So, we're really seeing profound, not just profound advances in the techniques, but profound implications for business and what business can do to take advantage of it. Now, obviously, we've also, one thing we've observed is that ChatGPT has woken the world up to AI and ML, right? So where some portion of people prior might have said, oh, it's really not something I need to be concerned with at this point, everyone is now aware that the potential is huge. So it's also created a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty. But from our point of view and the point of view that we try to perpetuate with our clients, this is a massive opportunity. So we see this in an incredibly positive light. Just a quick note on kind of where we think we are. Obviously, as I've said, the game has changed, right? ChatGPT has woken up the world, right? There's not a boardroom in America that isn't asking their companies, what should we be doing if we're not already with artificial intelligence? This depicts, you sort of in red, you can see the classic diffusion of innovation curve, and in purple, you can see on the broader curve kind of where we think we are. In other words, we're still in the early adopter stage. What does this mean for us? It means that, everyone that's out there is still struggling with the questions of what should we be doing? How should we be investing in it? That means, and from our point of view, that this is the exact right time to be looking inwardly at your company, to be looking around at use cases and thinking about what should our approach to artificial intelligence be. And that's really where, our company tries to work with clients to help them navigate some of that and create tools that help really manage the complexity and the uncertainty associated with, what should we be doing in this space.
You said on the earlier slide too about productivity, labor productivity. There's a lot of, fear out there with AI taking jobs and whatnot, but it's that enhancing productivity that's the real offense that firms can play, right? And the real growth opportunity that is there for so many firms. So it's really an
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I had someone ask me this question yesterday, if obviously there are going to be companies out there that use this to simply, cut costs, but we typically urge our clients to think bigger than that, which is exactly to your point. How can you take this and either, apply it in a way that increases capacity or increases the value that you deliver to your customers, or create new products and services that serve your customer and successfully advance your differentiated value, right? And that's really something exciting here, is that I think the opportunities, productivity gains, to your point, and the way that we think about leveraging AI ML is all about, it comes back to the way that you think about your core value and what you deliver to your customers, and how you are going to redefine that or perpetuate it in the age of AI. So, one of the things that, I also like to call out here is that, given where we are in this evolution, I think we're about to see some of the even faster acceleration. There have been a number of people, futurists and analysts, who look at this space who believe ChatGPT is just the tip of the iceberg. It's definitely served a purpose in terms of increasing international awareness of AI ML, but we're just getting started with what these techniques are going to be able to do. So, this also creates a challenge that we have to be, I think, explicit about, which is the science is progressing at a pace that no one who's focused on applying these techniques and technologies can possibly keep up with. You know, I think one of the things we've seen with ChatGPT is people saying, hey, that's really cool. You know, we need to be incorporating that in our company. Well, you know, I typically push back and say, how is your use case of ChatGPT going to really do something profound for your customers that other competitors aren't going to be able to do, right? So it may change, you know, the nature of the game in terms of, you know, table stakes. Everybody's going to have a ChatGPT, but unless you do something unique in your industry, in your company, like fine tune it on your data or do something really innovative, it's not necessarily going to move the needle as much as you might think it would. So, you know, it's drawn a lot of attention because of its massive advance. But that doesn't mean it's right for every company in every industry. So, you know, our recommendation and our position is that people and companies who are leading their application of AI, you don't want to try to keep pace. You need to figure out exactly what your focus is and use that focus to keep an eye on the right evolutions, the right techniques and technologies. Maybe you do that with a partner in some cases. Maybe you do it through a network of peer companies where you share ideas, but you know, you don't get distracted by every advance that comes along or every change in the science, because again, it's going to be massive and it's going to be distracting. So our recommendation again is, you know, keep focus, and we'll talk a bit more in a bit about what that looks like.
So don't chase the bright new shiny object per se, but be thoughtful about your approach and what I'm hearing from that. And so that kind of leads into a question of, you know, what should companies be doing with regard to their AI strategy?
Yeah, excellent. So, you know, as I said before, you know, things are moving quickly, but don't panic. This is really an opportunity for companies. And you know, as I'll explain a bit more in a minute, you know, the opportunity may not be there equally for every industry, right? Some, you know, as we talked about with ChatGPT, there are certain functions where it's going to really change the name of the game: customer service, automated marketing, right? Things like that. But there's plenty of it. There are plenty of industries where it's not really going to, you know, have a meaningful application. So again, you know, what we think is, you know, be explicit about the opportunity. And that starts with, you know, understanding what's an opportunity and what's not. So when I think of AI strategy, the one thing that's changed is it's really an imperative to have a position on what your company is going to do with artificial intelligence, even if that position is, you know, wait and see. So strategy doesn't mean that you have to, you know, doesn't have to equate to massive investment in artificial intelligence. It means that you've been intentional and thoughtful about what are your opportunities? How is it changing markets? What are your competitors doing? You know, those kinds of questions, you need to be asking those questions now, because I guarantee you, you know, your competitors are doing this. You know, your board members are thinking about this. So, you know, as you think about, you know, as you start to really get to the point where you're articulating what your strategy is going to be and getting alignment around it, it starts with this introspection of, you know, what is the opportunity? What is the imperative for us in terms of creating new value, leveraging these techniques? But it also is going to have a massive component of corporate valuation. When I was doing AI strategy back at Vista Equity, the hypothesis was, and it was proven out, that having a sustainable artificial intelligence capability would increase your corporate valuation. We're obviously also seeing that in markets today. But I think we're going to start to see it more widespread, in other words, across industries and across applications. And what that means is stakeholders are going to be asking, as I said, you know, hey, we are responsible for maximizing our corporate valuation through value to customers. What are we doing with AI? How are we thinking about leaning into it? And the answer cannot be, oh, we haven't thought about it much, right? The answer needs to be, yeah, we've put some effort into thinking about what this means and how we're going to approach it. And third, if you are at a point where you're seeking investment or financing or budget for investments in artificial intelligence, having an intentional strategy, a well thought out position is absolutely critical to getting that support, right? Every single one of our clients, at some point, whether it's with us or internally to their stakeholders, has to come up with some kind of ROI justification, right? So, is this going to make us money this year? If not, when? And if we don't have a clear optic to when we're going to see returns from this investment, are there strategic considerations that make it worth our investing in? All of these things, again, I think we have to be really intentional about and make a part of our strategy. So as we think about what that looks like, I like to think of an effective AI strategy as kind of a North Star. So, and that's why it starts with a vision. Who do we want to be when we grow up in this age of AI? There certainly are different perspectives on what the time frame is. I typically like to say 3 to 5 years, because shorter than that, and you're not looking far enough ahead. You're still thinking tactically about what are we doing in the next year or two. But beyond 5 years, it's a little too speculative. So, I usually say, think about your vision for who and how we want to be leveraging AI in 3 to 5 years. And again, one of the things I really emphasize here is, again, that core customer value. What is it that we do that's better than our competitors and that allowed us to succeed to this point? And then take that and think about what that's going to look like in an AI reimagined industry and economy. So, you might again think it's going to change the way that we interact with customers. It's going to change the speed and accuracy with which we can make decisions, right? I mean, these are all things that can go into that vision. And this can be challenging sometimes, especially because, successful companies got to this point by doing something right. So it can be very threatening to start to, take a hard look at those and whether they're going to persist in the same way that you've celebrated them over the past decade or more in an age where the AI is rewriting the way in which they're applied. Then the other two components are, you kind of, once you've articulated kind of where you want to go or how you see your future looking in this space, take a good hard look at where you are today, right? What is your current state assessment? And we have specific frameworks that we use to help clients think about, where are we in terms of being ready to do artificial intelligence? And then the roadmap is essentially how you get from where you are today to that future vision. And the roadmap is, and this is more than just a product roadmap, it's really a roadmap of what are the kinds of techniques and technologies that we want to be investing in. And more importantly, what are the capabilities that we're going to need to have in place in 3 to 5 years to be able to realize that vision? Technologies can be relatively easily acquired. Capabilities, true organizational capabilities, take a lot more intentionality and investment to develop successfully. So that really is an emphasis in terms of how we think about managing or navigating that roadmap.
Ben, here's a question that came in, and you've touched on a lot of this already, maybe, but just what kind of barriers are you seeing to AI adoption at firms? What kind of hurdles do people have in order to move different AI initiatives forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's some material that I'll come to in a minute to talk about that further. But the reality is that it's very easy to think about AI in terms of a use case, but it also makes it seem simpler than it is. Doing AI successfully at scale and, as a product in the marketplace or as a backbone to your corporate operations really involves a complex constellation of supporting activities. So, if you think about we have to hire talent to do it. We have to figure out where in the organization it sits. We have to figure out how to fund it. We have to figure out how to manage it. We have to figure out the techniques and technologies that are needed to support it, right? You don't just put AI out there and leave it. You have to monitor its performance. You have to look out for things like model drift as new data is acquired, or as the context in which it's applied might change. So, these are just a few. Obviously, then there's the whole other arena of ethics. Is it biased? Risk? Is there the potential that it can cause harm because of how it's applied? So there's a very complex constellation of considerations that we often overlook when we, are getting excited about the potential. And, but that's not to say that it's insurmountable. It just means that I think we have to be intentional about how we map and address all of that complexity. And by doing so, we can take something that right now seems really kind of scary and uncertain and noisy and make it simple, right? Less complex, less risky, and allow it to move faster. And that's really, I think, the point of a more intentional approach is, there are always going to be missteps, but most, I think, the majority of, I think 80+% of AI initiatives typically fail because of, missing this complexity. And the real danger is that once a company or a leader tries something with AI or works, spends a lot of money on something and it doesn't work, that typically creates a very negative perception and set of expectations about the potential that can further set companies back by making them too cautious where it's not necessary. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
So obviously, what should we be doing? The big question we get all the time. And, really, this is a simple tool that we use to kind of help cut through some of the anxiety, right? Not everybody needs to be freaking out about artificial intelligence. And the way that you can determine kind of where you are and how much you should be worrying or thinking about it at this stage is really a combination of what is your strategic imperative, right? As we said, that's defined by competition, opportunities, stakeholders, right? So, do you feel like you're getting left behind in your industry? And then what is the transformation effort? In other words, once we kind of have an idea of where we want to go and where we are, how big is the effort to cross that gap, to cross that chasm? So if your imperative is low and your transformation effort seems low, then, really it's kind of keep an eye out, monitor the competition, monitor the marketplace, monitor the techniques and technologies. But there's, the imperative is obvious. I mean, the urgency is obviously a bit less. But, if you expect your transformation effort is going to be quite large and your imperative, because competitors are rapidly moving forward with AI adoption and using it to strategic advantage, you really need to be thinking about leapfrogging, so that involves a lot of investment in artificial intelligence, and that can be risky, which is typically why, in quotes, we, suggest doing this with a partner, because trying to do this all on your own and, at a massively accelerated pace can be dangerous, can be risky.
So beyond these initial steps, what else should companies be focusing on?
Thank you. Yeah. So, the steps I've just outlined are kind of, what I recommend every company do, right? So, and again, even if the answer is low transformation effort, low imperative, we're not in a hurry right now, but, you've got your AI strategy articulated, which, by the way, I recommend turning into a document within the company so that it's a living artifact for two reasons. One, you can continually refer back to it, but also it will help align leaders and stakeholders in your organization around your position. But beyond, that and sort of assessing what your level of urgency is, we think that it really belies a focus on the complexity that I talked about before. So, what are those capabilities that are necessary to support successful artificial intelligence? As I said before, a majority of AI initiatives fail, and this has been, recognized time and again. Deloitte did a great study where they went into companies that were applying AI, and they said, in areas where you have tried to apply AI, what have been your challenges? And as you can see, if you just look briefly across this, technologies and techniques are only a small subset, right? You see things like integrating with other organizational and business systems. Executive commitment is a huge one, right? Managing risks, as I said before. And one that we, as in our company with our clients see constantly is the nature of the data, right? We typically, we have a tendency to think that data is data, and that is not the case. Data for successful artificial intelligence means something very different. And so you might look at a company that has a lot of data, but it's messy, or it was labeled wrong. Label meaning, this is a dog, this is a cat, and you use it to train the model. So, if you can imagine if you have pictures of dogs and cats and they're only, labeled correctly about 50% of the time, that's what your AI is going to learn, and it's not going to be able to successfully distinguish between those things. So data, maintenance is another huge one. What happens associated with putting the model into production and then supporting it? Again, we tend to have a presumption that you put the AI out there and it just sort of continues on its own, and that's not the case. So, again, this is not meant to say that these challenges aren't insurmountable. It's just to reinforce the point I made before, which is that companies and organizations often overlook the complexities associated with this. But again, that doesn't mean that they can't be addressed and made less complex. So so to reiterate what I was saying, we don't think that we think failure is because people don't understand the complexities. And the companies that are succeeding recognize that the way to address these complexities is by focusing on capabilities, right? So, how do you have let's say around ethics and risk? We have a lot of clients where we recommend that they institute an AI center of excellence. So in other words, sort of an advising body within the organization that's tasked with stewarding these kinds of things. From an adoption perspective, right? A lot of times especially with products that people are going to go use that have AI components in them, we're just beginning to understand how people use those products to effect or not. We had a client that had a major adoption problem. So in other words, they put really compelling products in front of people who didn't want to use them and didn't trust them. So how we as a company start to think about adoption before we release a product, right? We've thought about it in the past in terms of UI, UX, but that may be user experience or user design. Those things are going to look differently when you're dealing with artificial intelligence techniques. So, and not to say that all of these capabilities need to be things that you're hiring for or training for internally, right? There are firms that you can work with that can help you understand the nuances of AI adoption, for instance. There are frameworks that you can find and train on that will help upskill your company and your leadership around how to be attentive to AI ethics and things like that. So there are a lot of resources out there and a lot of alternatives to developing these capabilities, but they do need to be applied effectively and consistently for AI to succeed. And the reason that we focus on sustainability is because it's these capabilities that will allow you to continue to produce effective AI and support it and secure its adoption and keep that cycle going. So, and that's the nature of competitive advantage.
Ben, here's a really good question that just popped in. I want to definitely get it out there because I imagine a lot of people have this question. So businesses may see areas where they might be able to apply AI, but no, they can't themselves create that AI, right? So where should they turn so they can see and understand what platform AI products are available that they can then be customized to meet their need? Where can they go to even know what's out there that they can
What's out there?
use and customize?
Yeah, that's a
Call
great
you.
question.
I think that's the first thing they should do is call you. But
Yeah, well, I thank you for that. Yes, I mean, more abstractly, find a partner. But yes, that's a big part of what we do is help demystify. So again, we had a medical client who asked us to evaluate the 10 plus different large language models that have been trained specifically on medical techniques, medical language. And, we came up with a proprietary set of criteria and evaluated them all against those criteria. And we drew the criteria from the use case that client had in mind. So, it's not easy to do, and it is hard to do on your own. Now, that being said, there are plenty of resources out there, right? The Hugging Face thing for large language models is a great way to kind of see what's out there and get a little bit of a flavor of how things, how they differ.
what's that called again, Ben? Sorry.
Hugging Face.
Hugging Face. Okay.
So I think it's called the Hugging Face LLM catalog or something to that effect. So, but there are similar, approaches in all the other domains. So like, computer vision models, things like that. There are definitely products out there, but I typically tell companies, figure out how to navigate the space a little bit before you go commit to a product, because once you license a product and start to develop on top of it, you're typically kind of stuck with it for a while. And that can be frustrating if it's the wrong choice. It can be limiting. Some platforms don't really let you do bespoke or customization on top of them. And 99% of what we do from an engineering perspective is custom model development. So how do we take what you would get out of a software package that might get you 80%, and how can we get it to 95%? So, but there also, there are industry groups, I think, that you can find that are talking about the implications of AI in the industry and comparing different techniques and technologies. Some of the cloud providers might even be able to help, although they're sort of a little bit in the product camp in terms of, hey, here's how we would suggest you do it. Use our tools and techniques. We are tool and technique agnostic. We partner with all the cloud providers, but we don't push or advocate any particular tool, which allows us to say, for your application, we can pick the best in class from this, and this, put it together and make something that you wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else. And that's a currently kind of a rare service and a rare offering that we have, but I think we're going to see it increasingly popular.
How about the newsletters or blogs that you might recommend to follow?
Yeah, there are some great ones. Obviously, podcasts. There are plenty of good podcasts. In fact, I was just talking to a guy the other day who, he has a podcast dedicated to the application of artificial intelligence in the energy industry. So, you might look for those kinds of things. You might, again, newsletters around the techniques and technologies can be a bit misleading, but I would expect there are reports that are industry specific. You can also find, the McKinseys of the world have papers that are a lot of times written with either multiple industry use cases in them and, details around the techniques that they applied. So you can kind of start to navigate some of it that way. But again, the pace of change is so radical that, what was published 6 months ago and what, you read in the last couple of months and now, are trying to act on, it may be dated by the time you're ready to put something into production. So that's why I think a partner is really key, because they can help you tell, within this explosive pace of change, say now is the right time to make an investment here. And this, well, maybe that's not the right investment at this point.
Super.
So this is just an example of kind of how we think about organizing the capabilities. And this is a very simplified version of a model that we use. But you can see on the left, these are the capabilities that we think or companies need to be paying attention to. How do you manage the life cycle of AI? How do you innovate in the world of AI? How do you govern it? How do you operationalize it? And we put these out against sort of 4 stages, right? So where are companies in this progression? They're foundational, meaning they're just now focusing on the basics. They're nascent, meaning they're kind of just getting started, but they're committed to doing AI. Acidization means they're at a point where they're recognizing all of the critical capabilities for them that they need to invest in, and they're making those investments in a way that really is accreting or building that capability. And then leading are the companies that are obviously way out in front and they want to stay there. Now, it doesn't mean that for every company or every leader, you have to be leading in all of these dimensions. So, the stars and circles, kind of the stars will tell you, this is where we think we need to be in 3 to 5 years. And the blue circles will tell you, this is where we think we are today. So, for each of these capabilities, you might have a different kind of gap analysis. So lastly, I like to leave people with, what's important for executing an AI strategy. I've already spoken about the strategy statement. So your vision, your current state assessment, and sort of your roadmap for how you're going to get from here to there. Again, the things on the right are critical values that we think are served by or embedded in these artifacts. The second is a business case. And I spoke about this a little bit in saying, what do we need to have to justify the investment and capabilities and demonstrate ROI for the people that are going to be making this investment in or on our behalf. I've spoken also a little bit about this, an advisory team. This can serve a lot of great functions, right? So how do you get together a leadership group of people within your company who are tasked with this, but also friends from outside the company or allies who can help you along this journey and help you identify resources to develop these capabilities. It really helps you cut through a lot of the noise. It also helps you stay nimble, right? So that you're able to pivot quickly as new opportunities arise, which may be hard to do from day-to-day operations. And then finally, the capabilities roadmap, which, leveraging a framework like the one I just showed you says, here's where we are organizationally, here's where we want to be, here's how we're going to get there. And, with an eye towards sustainability, so that once we start investing in these capabilities, we understand what's involved in sort of staying current with what's required and the nature of advance in this industry. So again, differs a lot by company, differs a lot by industry, but very important to think about it.
Ben, we just have a minute or two left, but just quickly, how does Kung Fu work with companies to create value with AI?
Great, thank you. So we are a consultancy, more appropriately a professional services firm, because what we do is enable our clients to compete in AI, and we do that through a combination of strategy, like a lot of what I've spoken about here today, customized engineering, meaning we work with clients to do everything from building products that they want to launch or optimizing operations. And then operations, meaning a lot of the capabilities that we were speaking about, right? What are the change management activities that need to be going on? What are the tools and architectures that you need to have in place to continue to do AI effectively? And to make all of that happen, we developed a proprietary framework or methodology. And really, it's all around AI-centric transformation. In other words, thinking about how to reinvent your company for an AI-first future. Again, not forgetting about the core value, but really re-envisioning what that core value means in an AI economy. The inner circle is sort of how we think about the technical development and how it is integrated with and supports the outside circle, which is really all about the capabilities that I've been speaking about today.
Super. Well, let's go to the next. Yeah, let's leave everyone with this information. It's been great to hear from you today, Ben. It's an exciting area and really an exciting opportunity for businesses and firms to increase their productivity and really grow. And we know that you all would be great partners for any firms looking to maximize their AI strategies. So really appreciate your time today, Ben.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all for your time today.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.